Just by looking at her, you would never guess the adventures she's had. Although polished and professional, Freddi Dogterom is not afraid to get her hands dirty or to venture out onto the thin ice. Distinguished Toastmaster Freddi is a professional speaker, a storyteller, a facilitator, and a multi-category district champion. She regularly speaks to motivate, encourage, and educate a wide variety of audiences, from corporate keynotes to workshops and seminars which highlight her specialty in personality training. Her message has reached far and wide. Her areas of expertise include personal development, team building, and communication training. Through storytelling, she uses her hard-earned wisdom and broad experience to help people build the lives they want to lead. Freddi's varied background includes being a champion junior equestrian and battle racer, and as you will discover, she worked way north of the Arctic Circle as a recruiter for international oil companies. And long before the famous television show, Freddi was one of Canada's first female ice road truckers. This morning, we will hear some of her adventures, and you will learn about the intriguing legend of the Inukshuk. Please welcome, presenting not just a pile of stones, Freddi Dogterom. Congratulations. Go for it. Thank you.
Have you ever seen one of these? Kind of cute, isn't he? I remember him as the symbol on the flag for the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, Canada. All around the world, our original peoples have left us symbols. If you think about the west coast of North America, we have the First Nations in Canada and the American Indians who've left us the majestic totem poles. In Egypt, they left us pyramids. And in Australia, we have the handprints in the caves. Well, in Canada, they have given us the Inukshuk. Now, that's kind of a weird word, isn't it? Inukshuk. Now, I know there's some people that like to spell things, and so let's spell it. It's just like it sounds. I-N-U-K-S-H-U-K. Inukshuk. Let's try it together. On the count of 3. Inukshuk. Fabulous. Now you know a bit of Canadian. The Inukshuk is not just a pile of stones. And when I was living far in the north, 400 miles north of the Arctic Circle, I had the opportunity to meet many of these fine figures. And no two were alike. I would see them and I would recognize that they had pillars and they had purpose. And I thought they were pretty. In the Inuit language, Inukshuk means the stone man that points the way. On the top of the world, on the tundra, there's no trees, there's no landmarks, it's barren. And one of the greatest dangers for humans in that environment is that they can get lost. Because if they get lost, they could perish through exposure or through predators. And so the original peoples discovered a way of communicating with each other. They took what they had, which was rocks, and started stacking them up in ways that would communicate a message. You see, it's not just a pile of stones. It's a language. It can warn of danger. It can talk about a great place to camp, or perhaps where the meat is cached, or maybe where the shamans like to meet. When I was working up north, I was doing jobs that didn't allow me to wear sparkly clothes. It was quite a bit more blue collar. But I had the opportunity to fly around to different communities and meet the people. One of the people that I met was named Ida. Ida was a beautiful, hunched, brown, wrinkled little walnut of a woman with a heart full of love. She loved her community, she loved her people, she loved her culture, and she loved me and brought me in under her wing. Now, Ida was cool. She taught me a lot of the ways. I can work with fur, and I can do beadwork, but the best thing she did is she told me stories. And she told me the stories of the Inukshuk, how it came to be and how it meant. You see, Ida and I would spend hours, and we would go around and we'd gather up rocks. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to pile up rocks. Have you? You go to the beach and you gather some rocks, and if you're lucky, you can get 2. But it takes a lot of skill to pile them like this. And so Ida and I would spend hours, and we would pile up the rocks. And she'd say to me, "Now, Freddi, don't just pick the pretty ones. Don't go for the sparkle, go for substance." And so we practiced for hours and hours until I got to the point where I could actually build a pretty good figure. And she would talk to me and she'd say, "Freddi, every stone is important. Every stone talks, every stone means something. But the most important stone of all is the stone that is on the top. Because from a distance, this shows the nature, the character, or the spirit of the Inukshuk." I had a tremendous time with Ida. And what was really great is that between my jobs, traveling around the Arctic, meeting the people, and the time that I spent with Ida, I thought my life was phenomenal. Life's funny, you know. Just when you think you're getting it all together, somebody comes along and starts tossing your rocks around. Have you ever had days like that? Sick child, divorce, cancer. Man, your life can get messed up pretty quick. The day came when I was going to move out of the Arctic down into southern Canada. Didn't really want to go, but my life was a mess. I needed to restart and to reconstruct. Well, my last day, Ida comes to me and she's walking down the road and it's dusty. She takes my hand in hers and says, "Freddi, you've been like a daughter to me. I want to give you a gift. You don't need a cushion. You don't need mitts. You don't need slippers. I give you the gift of the story and the legend of the Inukshuk. Take it with you. Share it. And when you go to the south, don't build an Inukshuk out of stones. Build it out of the people in your life." With that, she walked away down the street. Well, I prepared to drive south. Now, I was living on top of the world, 400 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Not a lot of roads. Fortunately, there was only one because I am very directionally challenged, and I knew if I headed south, I'd be all right. So I piled into my 1978 Ford Bronco, and it was full of stuff. And myself and my son and my sister had little cocoons. And there was just enough room for the three of us. So we plugged in the ABBA gold tape and headed south. 4,800 miles. Or, for my Canadian friends or my husband who likes numbers, 7,724.6 kilometers. Took 10 days. We traveled over mountain ranges. We went through 2 territories, 3 provinces, 2 forest fires, and 1 flat tire. We arrived in southern Alberta. I didn't know anybody. I had no friends. I had no family. Heck, even the person that hired me had quit. And the day that I arrived was a hot, dry, southern Alberta prairie day where the wind was blowing harder than it does in Chicago. What had I got myself into? Well, when you come to a new community, what do? You try to fit in. You try to make it work. Now, many of you have traveled a long way just to get here today. And I know that there's lots of folks here that have made big moves, maybe from state to state, maybe across provinces, or maybe around the world. Remember what it felt like when you got to that new community? It was very hard to fit in. I was struggling. I didn't know anyone. My son was not well, and he was having trouble fitting in. And one day back in my mind, the words of Ida came to me. Build an Inukshuk. Yes, this is something familiar. This is what I can do. So I went around and I started gathering rocks. Went down to the river, got some rocks. Went out into a farmer's field, got some rocks, and I started building. Well, I had this adorable little fellow sitting right on my front lawn. Went off to work, came home, and somebody had kicked him over and stolen my rocks. That was not a good week. You know, sometimes when your life is in a mess and you're in a new environment and you're trying to start over, different messages go through your head. And what I was thinking is, what would Judy Carter do? Didn't she tell us yesterday you take a mess, right? And you turn it into a message of you? Well, Judy wasn't there. But I had Ida. So I started thinking about all that she had said to me. My gift to you, Freddi, is the story and the legend of the Inukshuk. Take it and share it. And when you go south, build yourself a new Inukshuk, but not with rocks, with the people in your life. Oh, yes. It's important to listen to the entire message. And so that's what I started to do. I started to take a look at the people that I had started to get to know. And I started at home. I started in my neighborhood. Now, it was really neat. Where I lived, on one side there was an undertaker, and on the other side was a guy that worked at the brewery. So I figured between the beer and the undertaker, I was in a pretty good neighborhood. But there was an amazing lady that always had her coffee pot on, and her heart was always open. My son could go over there and play with her children, and when I came home from work, she'd say, hey, come on over for coffee. She was a fabulous neighbor, and so I thought, as I'm starting to build my Inukshuk of life, I'm going to include my neighbor as one of my foundations. Like many of you, I was starting work, brand new office, brand new coworkers, brand new job. Wow. Think about the last time you had a new coworker come into your office. Were you warm and welcoming? Did you say, "Hey, new girl, come for coffee with me"? Or did you sort of look at them and size them up and go, you'll have to prove herself? In my office, we had both kinds of people. But there was an absolutely remarkable woman. She stepped forward and she says, "Hey, new girl, why don't you come for lunch with me?" And so Sandy and I went for lunch. And sometimes we would go and sit in the park and just talk about our lives. And she says, "Hey, how's your son doing getting friends at school?" I said, "No, not so good." She says, "My son's going to that school. Let's get together so our boys can get together." Wow, what a coworker. Are you that kind of coworker? Well, as you get to know a new community, obviously, there's people that you get to know in the community. And if you belong to organizations or associations, you get to know people quite readily. I hadn't belonged to any associations yet, but I did meet a girl who worked for the city. She was an interesting girl. She was like the Wile E. Coyote to my Roadrunner. Do any of you know those people that your parents say, "Don't play with that kid, they'll get you into trouble"? She was that kid. I love her. She had so much energy and enthusiasm, and she would just grab new people. And I was always meeting folks through her because if she saw somebody new, she'd bring them into our circle. It was fabulous. And one of the things that she and I decided to do was to start to host some formal dinners so that we could get to know people. One of the formal dinners that we hosted was a liver lovers dinner. How many of you would love to come to my liver lovers dinner? 7. Great, we'll have seating. So how do you host a liver lovers dinner? Well, the first thing you do is you invite people. But before you do that, you have a theme. And we did this for 4 years in a row. We had a black tie theme, and we had a Mexican theme, and we had an Italian theme. Don't try the liver lasagna. That was nasty. But for our last one, we decided to go with a formal liver dinner. Liver deserves formality. And so we got the recipes together, and we had the hors d'oeuvres with the little rosemary sprigs, and we made stir fries and this and that. But I wanted to have a really big, awesome dessert. So I took a look through some recipe books, and I found something called a baked Alaska. Oh, that spoke to my heart. And so I looked at the recipe, and I substituted a few ingredients and discovered that I could make it with liver. And you know when you go on a cruise ship, and they have that dinner where the penguins come, right, and all the desserts on fire? I thought, I can do this. I got it. And so the dinner came, and people were standing around with their adult beverages and having their hors d'oeuvres and their dinner, and it came time for dessert. Well, with surgical precision, I had laid all my ingredients out. I had my liver mousse. I had my measuring cup with a precise amount of brandy measured out. And I had a barbecue lighter, candle lighter, so that I could ignite the dessert, pretend I was a penguin. We dimmed the lights. I gently took the dessert, poured the brandy over it, passed the lighter to my friend. She struck it, put it onto the dessert, and kapoof! It exploded. There was fire everywhere. And I had burning, sticky meringue all over my pretty clothes. And it was on the curtains. And it was on the carpet. We're going, what happened? People that like liver are not necessarily normal people. They could be, but these weren't. And so one of our friends had replaced the brandy in the measuring cup with good old 150 proof Everclear. That stuff burns. Wow, that was the last liver lovers party we had because the insurance company wouldn't cover us for any more. You have a friend like that? If you don't, go get one. They are fabulous. Well, it was through my friend Jan that I started to get involved in the community. And in every community, whether you're in Canada, USA, or anywhere around the world, there's places where you can get involved. There's Rotary clubs, there's Lions clubs, there's volunteer organizations. And have you heard of an organization called Toastmasters? That's a great place to get to know people. So as I started getting out into the community, I started to meet more people. And I always remembered Ida's words, because as I started to reach out, people were reaching back. A friendship has to start with that first gesture. I always remembered, though, what Ida had said, that the most important rock on your Inukshuk of life is the head. Because this is what shows your spirit or your character from near or far. It shows who you are, your beliefs. I have had the wonderful opportunity of building a life out of my friends, just like Ida said. I'm not going to see my friend Ida again because she has passed on and is now with her ancestors. But she gave me the gift of the story of the Inukshuk to share. And so I share with you today that you can take your life and your friends and your family and your relationships, and you can take these stones and you can build them into something beautiful. That's the gift. But you see, with every gift, you have a choice. Are you going to take this gift? Are you going to reach out to those new people in your office, the new people in your community, maybe that new neighbor? Maybe the person that doesn't seem to just fit in. Are you going to be the one that reaches out and brings them into your Inukshuk of life? Or are you going to take this gift and these rocks and throw them away? It's your choice.
Thank you, Freddi.